Dusty roads stretched for thousands of miles under a relentless sun. This was the Silk Road, a sprawling network that connected worlds for over 1,500 years. By the end of our journey, you will understand how this ancient highway shaped everything from the food on your table to the ideas that built modern civilization. We will uncover the secret cargo that moved in the shadows of silk caravans, from explosive technologies and forbidden knowledge to devastating plagues that traveled in silence. What single item traded on these routes do you think held the most surprising power? The shimmering fabric that gave these ancient highways their romantic name was far more than mere cloth. Silk was a technological marvel, a closely guarded weapon of soft power. Its story begins in the river valleys of ancient China, where for thousands of years, the process of raising silkworms and unraveling their delicate cocoons was a state secret of the highest order. Revealing the methods of sericulture to an outsider was a crime punishable by death. This monopoly created an aura of impossible luxury around the material. Imagine a single thread, lighter than a feather yet stronger than a comparable strand of steel, capable of being woven into a fabric that felt cool in summer and warm in winter. This was the magic that the West craved, but the silk that traveled west was not one single product. Caravans carried everything from heavy bales of raw, unspun silk thread to bolts of finished fabric shimmering in plain weave. Then there were the true masterpieces, elaborate embroidered tapestries depicting mythical beasts and intricate floral patterns, or garments tailored for the elites of empires far away. A Roman senator paying a fortune for a robe of deep purple silk, or a Persian Shah receiving a gift of embroidered silk curtains, were not just buying clothing, they were purchasing a piece of distant, enigmatic China itself. This value made silk perfect for purposes beyond fashion. It became a high-value currency, a compact form of wealth that could be carried across continents. More importantly, it was a supreme diplomatic tool. Chinese emperors would send vast quantities of silk as gifts to nomadic chieftains or foreign rulers, a tangible offering meant to secure borders, open markets, and forge alliances. So while spices and gems would later fill the saddlebags, it was the pursuit of this miraculous thread that first stitched the continents together, creating a network of desire that would carry far more unexpected cargo in its wake. Yet the taste of true power was not sweet, but sharp and pungent. While silk clothed empires in luxury, it was the humble spice that truly transformed the kitchens, medicine cabinets, and economies of the world. Picture a medieval European feast, a display of wealth where meat, often preserved with salt, was the centerpiece. Without refrigeration, the flavor was monotonous, sometimes bordering on unpleasant. Then, a merchant unlocks a small, precious sack. The air fills with the fiery, complex aroma of black peppercorns, each one a tiny jewel hauled over 6-7 miles from the Malabar coast of India. This was not merely seasoning, it was a revolution on the tongue. A sprinkle of pepper could mask the taste of aging meat, making preservation more palatable. In a world before modern medicine, spices were also believed to balance the body's vital humors. Cloves from the distant Moluccas, islands so remote they were known as the Spice Islands, were used for toothaches. Cinnamon from Sri Lanka was thought to aid digestion, but their most potent use was as a blazing symbol of status. In an age where wealth was often displayed on the dining table, possessing these rare, fragrant granules from the edge of the known world was the ultimate flex. Pepper was so valuable it was used to pay rents and taxes, literally worth its weight in gold. A single sack could make a merchant's fortune, which is why caravans braved bandits, deserts, and mountain passes to carry them. This immense risk for such lightweight cargo created a chain of markups so staggering that by the time a pound of nutmeg reached London, its price had multiplied 1,000-fold. That desperate, costly desire for direct access to the source would not remain contained to overland routes forever. The spice trade, with all its allure and profit, planted a seed of obsession in the mind of Europe. It was this very obsession that would soon push ships beyond the edges of maps, sparking a frantic race to find a sea route to the Indies, and accidentally launching the entire age of exploration. The scent of pepper and cloves, carried on desert winds, ultimately filled the sails of caravels heading into the vast, unknown ocean. But the spice trade created a curious problem, one that required a heavier, more tangible solution. How does an empire pay for mountains of pepper or endless bolts of silk when its own currency is not trusted thousands of miles away? The answer was carried in strongboxes, clinking with the sound of pure power. Precious metals were the universal language of value, the hard currency that oiled the entire machine of transcontinental trade. For centuries, a great river of gold flowed westward from the mines of West Africa, crossing the Sahara on camelback to reach Mediterranean ports. Meanwhile, the Roman Empire, desperate for Eastern luxuries, was hemorrhaging its own gold and silver coins in the opposite direction. Historians like Pliny the Elder lamented this drain, worrying that vast sums were being lost to India and China just to satisfy Roman tastes for pearls, spices, and silks. We know he was right because of what archaeologists keep digging up. From hoards in southern India to scattered finds along the Ganges River, Roman gold aurae and silver denarii have been unearthed, silent witnesses to ancient shopping sprees of epic scale. A single coin minted with the face of a Roman emperor could travel further than any legion, ending up in a merchant's purse in a bustling Indian port city, accepted because the metal itself was pure and trusted. This exchange did more than just purchase goods. It circulated ideas. The very concept of standardized, state-issued coinage traveled along these routes. The Byzantine Empire's solidus, a gold coin of remarkable purity, became the dollar of its day, respected from Europe to the Silk Road oases. This model influenced the magnificent coinage of later empires, including the Tang dynasty in China, which issued its own renowned gold and copper coins for both domestic use and long-distance trade. So while silks were light and spices were fragrant, the most fundamental cargo was often the densest, a heavy, metallic backbone of wealth that made all the other trade possible. It was the relentless search for more of this metallic wealth that would ultimately send explorers in search of mythical golden kingdoms, turning trade routes into pathways for conquest. Yet the most profound treasures were not always soft or fragrant, but carved from the very bones of the earth. Beyond gold and silver, a different kind of mineral wealth moved along the Silk Road, one valued not just for its beauty, but for its perceived connection to the divine. At the pinnacle of this spiritual commerce stood jade, specifically the luminous nephrite pulled from the riverbeds of cotton, in what is now Western China. To the Chinese, this was not a simple gem. It was the stone of heaven. Its smooth, cool touch, its incredible toughness that resisted breaking, and its range of colors from creamy white to deep spinach green made it a substance of ultimate purity. It was considered so potent that it was carved into ritual discs symbolizing the heavens, placed in the mouths of the dead to preserve the body, and even fashioned into entire burial suits laced with gold thread for imperial nobles. believed to armor the soul for the afterlife. A single piece of Cotonese jade, traveling east to the Chinese heartland, carried the weight of cosmic order and eternal protection. This belief in the power of stone was a universal language. From the mountains of Afghanistan came lapis lazuli, a rock of the deepest, most celestial blue, flecked with golden pyrite like a starry night sky. The Egyptians ground it into powder for the eye shadow of pharaohs and used it in the funeral mask of Tutankhamun. Centuries later, medieval European artists would pay a fortune for the same stone, grinding it into the priceless pigment ultramarine, reserved for the robes of the Virgin Mary in their most sacred paintings. From the dry hills of Persia came turquoise, its sky blue hue believed to ward off the evil eye and bring victory in battle, making it a favorite adornment for shields, horse bridles, and turbans. And from the valleys of Burma came rubies, the fiery king of gems, thought to contain an inner flame that promised invincibility and passion. These stones were never merely decorative. They were metaphysical technology. A Central Asian chieftain wearing a turquoise-studded dagger wasn't just showing off wealth, he was carrying a shield of spiritual protection. A Chinese emperor holding a jade by disc during a ceremony wasn't just holding an artifact, he was communing with heaven itself. Their value was a complex alchemy of rarity, beauty, and profound belief, making them the ultimate luxury for the elite who saw the world as a place where material and spiritual power were forever intertwined. And if stones could hold the essence of the heavens, what then of the living cargo that began to traverse these same routes, creatures whose very presence could rewrite the destiny of empires? The value of a stone could be measured in spiritual weight, but the value of a cup was measured in its perfect, impossible fragility. Among the most astonishing cargoes to traverse those brutal mountain passes were ceramics, from humble clay pots to objects of such finery they seemed conjured from moonlight. While every culture produced its own sturdy, everyday pottery for local use, the caravans carried something else entirely, the technological marvel of high-fired porcelain. For over 1,000 years, China held the secret to this alchemy, combining a special white clay called kaolin with a mineral called patency, and firing it in kilns at temperatures so intense the material vitrified, becoming translucent, ringing like a bell when tapped, and impervious to liquids. Europe would not unravel this mystery until the early 18th century, making every piece that arrived via the Silk Road a small miracle. Two styles became legendary. First was celadon, a ware with a soft, subtle glaze ranging from pale gray-green to the deep, cool hue of carved jade. Its beauty was in its understated elegance. Its surface often crackled like ice, and it was so prized across Asia that it inspired a myth, a belief that celadon would change color or even crack if it came into contact with poison. Then came the revolution of blue and white. This iconic style was itself a product of the Silk Road, its vivid blue designs painted with cobalt oxide, a mineral imported all the way from Persia. Chinese artisans combined their peerless porcelain body with this foreign pigment, creating vases, plates, and bowls adorned with dragons, lotus flowers, and scenic landscapes that took the world by storm. The journey for these pieces was an act of faith. They were wrapped meticulously in straw or coarse paper, then packed tightly into wooden chests, their spaces filled with cushioning bulk like tea leaves, beans, or grain. A single camel might carry a chest holding a dozen pieces, and if 5 survived the months-long trek unbroken, the profit on those 5 could cover the loss of the other 7 and still make a merchant wealthy. When these pieces finally arrived in the Middle East or later in Europe, they caused a sensation. They were not just dishes, they were symbols of ultimate refinement and distant, sophisticated civilization. Islamic potters in places like Persia and Turkey immediately began trying to replicate the look, creating beautiful faience, a tin-glazed earthenware that mimicked the white and blue aesthetic, but lacked the magical thinness and strength of true porcelain. This imitation game continued west. By the 17th century, Dutch artisans in Delft were producing their famous Delftware, the blue and white pottery that filled European homes with a taste of the exotic East. Every imitation, every inspired piece was a silent transmission of an idea, a proof that along with spices and gems, the Silk Road was carrying an entire visual language, setting the table for a world where beauty itself became a global commodity. And if a teacup could carry such cultural weight, what invisible, transformative ideas were being exchanged in the scrolls and books that traveled in the very same saddlebags? The fragile teacups and shimmering silks were carried on the backs of living, breathing engines of trade. Among the most vital cargo on the Silk Road were the animals themselves, creatures traded not for their beauty but for their sheer power, their endurance, and their ability to reshape civilizations. The most legendary of these were the heavenly horses. These towering steeds from the Fergana Valley, in modern-day Uzbekistan, were unlike anything the Chinese Han Dynasty had ever seen. Chinese horses were smaller, more suited to pulling chariots than bearing armored riders. But the nomadic Xiongnu Confederation to the north had cavalry mounted on robust horses, giving them a terrifying military advantage. When Emperor Wu learned of the Fergana horses, reputed to sweat blood and possess supernatural stamina, he became obsessed. He launched entire military expeditions just to secure them, a costly endeavor that underscored their priceless value. These horses were not mere animals. They were a strategic technology, a living upgrade to the Han military that helped secure borders and expand the empire. Their introduction changed the very nature of Chinese warfare, shifting the focus from chariots to powerful mounted cavalry. For the long-haul journey itself, another beast was indispensable, the Bactrian camel. With its two humps storing fat for sustenance and its broad, padded feet perfect for sandy and rocky terrain, this camel was the 18-wheeler of the ancient world. A single animal could carry loads of 400 to 500 pounds for 25 miles a day without water. Caravans of hundreds of these creatures, linked by ropes, formed the essential supply chains across the Taklamakan Desert and the Central Asian steppes. They were so vital that they were bred specifically for the trade routes, creating a specialized transport system that moved everything from silks to spices. But the exchange went beyond these iconic creatures. Hardy Central Asian sheep with their thick, woolly coats were brought east, improving local herds. Hunting dogs from Persia, known for their speed and sight, became prized companions for royalty. Even everyday animals like goats and cattle moved along these routes, slowly but permanently altering regional agriculture and diets. This living trade was a slow-motion revolution in genetics. It diversified livestock, increased food security, and provided the raw muscle that built empires and connected continents. The snort of a horse and the groan of a camel were the true soundtracks of the Silk Road, a constant reminder that its foundation was built not just on ideas and objects, but on the strength of living creatures. And as these animals moved, they carried with them unseen passengers, biological stowaways that would prove to be the most devastating cargo of all. While the East mastered the alchemy of earth and fire to create porcelain, the West held its own secret, a craft born from sand and flame. Glassmaking was a technology where the Mediterranean world reigned supreme, and its products flowed eastward along the Silk Road as coveted treasures. For centuries, Roman artisans produced glass of stunning clarity and vibrant color, from delicate perfume bottles and intricate mosaic tiles to grand bowls that played with light. This was not the crude, bubbly glass of earlier times, but a material of true artistry, often shaped with molds or blown into breathtakingly thin forms. When these pieces reached the courts of Han China or later the Tang dynasty, they caused a sensation. In a culture where ceramic and jade were the pinnacle of craftsmanship, this translucent, liquid, solid substance seemed like captured light or frozen ice. Chinese poets wrote of liu lai, their term for glass, with wonder, describing its mysterious, jewel-like qualities. The fascination was so profound that Chinese craftsmen began attempting to replicate it, creating their own beautiful glass objects. But for a long time, the finest, clearest glassware remained an import, a luxury item that spoke of a different kind of artistic genius from a distant empire. After the Roman era, the torch of glass-making excellence passed to the Sasanian Persians and later the Islamic world, whose artisans perfected the art of enameling and gilding glass, creating mosque lamps and ornate vessels that continued the eastward flow of this luminous technology. But the most widespread and democratic form of this trade was not in grand vases, but in something tiny and portable glass beads, produced in vast quantities in places like Alexandria, India, and later Venice. These beads were the glittering pennies of the ancient world. Traders carried them in great sacks, a compact form of wealth that could be traded for spices, textiles, or other goods from Southeast Asia all the way to the coasts of Africa. In places where metal coinage was unknown, these colorful, durable beads became a primary currency. Archaeologists have found identical beads from Mediterranean workshops, in tombs in Korea, and in ancient trading ports in East Africa, silent proof of a truly globalized network of value. A single strand could buy a meal, a handful could secure safe passage, and a chest full could represent a merchant's entire capital. This exchange of glass reveals a fundamental truth often overlooked. The Silk Road was never a one-way street of Eastern goods flowing west. It was a vibrant, reciprocal dialogue of technologies. The East sent forth porcelain and silk, while the West sent back glass and the expertise to make it. Each civilization marveled at the other's mastery. Each sought to imitate or acquire it. And in that endless loop of desire and exchange, the world slowly, inevitably, began to knit itself together. And if something as delicate as a glass bead could circumnavigate the globe, what other, far more dangerous and invisible things were hitching a ride in the holds of ships and the packs of camels? The glittering beads and fragile glass were traded openly, but some of the most valuable cargo moved in whispers. Beyond spices and silks, a darker commerce thrived, one built on the bodies of magnificent creatures. For millennia, a relentless demand for luxury and supposed cures fueled a global trade in animal parts, a shadow market that stretched from the savannas of Africa to the palaces of Asia. At its heart was ivory, the creamy white dentine of elephant tusks. African ivory, with its softer texture and larger size, was highly prized by Roman and Byzantine artisans for carving into intricate statuettes, lavish furniture inlays, and delicate jewelry boxes. Asian elephant ivory, denser and with a finer grain, was the preferred medium for Chinese master carvers, who transformed it into breathtaking scenes of mountains and pavilions, ceremonial scepters, and the famous nested balls carved from a single tusk. This material was more than ornament. It was a symbol of purity, nobility, and immense wealth. But the cost was measured in lives. Even in ancient times, the pressure on elephant populations near trade routes was severe. Caravans heading east also carried another substance of mythical potency, rhinoceros horn. Ground into powder, it was not used for dagger handles as commonly believed, but consumed as a fever-reducing medicine in many traditional pharmacopoeias across Asia. Its rarity and high price, often exceeding that of gold by weight, made it the ultimate luxury medicine, a status symbol for the elite who believed in its power. Alongside these were the skins and furs of big cats, like leopards and tigers. A robe lined with leopard fur or a warrior's shield covered in tiger skin was a dramatic display of power, suggesting the wearer possessed the animal's strength and ferocity. This trade did not just follow the official Silk Road, it created its own parallel, clandestine networks. Smugglers and middlemen operated in the shadows, bypassing official tolls and controls to move these forbidden goods. The ecological impact, while not understood in modern terms, was real. Local extinctions occurred along heavily trafficked corridors, pushing hunters deeper into wilderness areas in a perpetual, devastating search. This ancient traffic reveals a sobering truth. The networks that once moved silk and ideas were equally adept at moving the pieces of vanishing worlds, a testament to a human desire that could strip a continent to adorn a crown. A world connected by sight and touch was also bound together by scent. Among the most precious cargoes to cross the deserts were not solid objects, but fragrant vapors trapped in resin and wood, substances valued for their power to please the gods and define the elite. The most legendary of these were frankincense and myrrh, two aromatic resins harvested from scraggly trees that grew only in the harsh, dry landscapes of southern Arabia and the Horn of Africa. To collect frankincense, harvesters would make careful cuts in the bark of the Boswellia tree, allowing the milky sap to bleed out and harden into tear-shaped droplets known as tears. Myrrh came from the Commiphora tree in a similar, painful process. These resins were not mere perfumes, they were the breath of the divine. When burned over hot coals, frankincense released a sweet, citrusy smoke believed to carry prayers directly to heaven. It was essential in the temples of Egypt, the ziggurats of Babylon, and later in the rituals of Christianity and Islam. Myrrh, with its deeper, more medicinal aroma, was crucial for embalming the dead, its preservative qualities and solemn scent making it a staple in funerary rites from Rome to India. A Roman funeral pyre without myrrh would have been considered impoverished, even disrespectful. Their value was astronomical. The Roman naturalist Pliny complained that the empire's insatiable demand for these aromatics was draining its treasury, with caravans of thousands of camels moving slowly from southern Arabia north to markets in Gaza and Petra. This was the incense route, a specialized, perilous network of trails that fed directly into the broader Silk Road. Traveling these paths meant braving bandits, extreme thirst, and the total dependence on nomadic guides who knew the location of secret wells. The risk was worth it because the scent of sanctity had no substitute. From the east came another kind of fragrant treasure, sandalwood. Harvested from the heartwood of slow-growing trees in India and Southeast Asia, sandalwood's rich, creamy, and long-lasting scent made it sacred in Hindu and Buddhist ceremonies. It was carved into religious icons, ground into paste for ritual markings, and its essential oil was the base for countless perfumes. Meanwhile, in Persia, artisans perfected the art of distilling rose petals into rosewater, a delicate fragrance that symbolized paradise. It was sprinkled in palaces and courtyards, used to flavor exquisite sweets, and added to the final rinse for washing the hands of guests, a gesture of ultimate hospitality. This trade in aromatics created an invisible geography of desire. A Roman patrician anointing himself with oil infused with Arabian frankincense, a Chinese noblewoman storing her silks in a sandalwood chest, and a Persian poet describing a beloved's scent as attar of roses, were all participating in a sensory network that spanned continents. These scents defined sacred space, purified the body, and signaled status in a way no visible luxury ever could. They proved that the most powerful connections between civilizations could be carried on the wind. The scent of sanctity was powerful, but the sight of true authority was unmistakable, painted in colors worth more than their weight in gold. To understand the visual language of ancient power, you must follow the trade in dyes and pigments, the vibrant materials that colored empires. At the very peak of this chromatic hierarchy was Tyrian purple, a color born not from a plant, but from the sea. In the eastern Mediterranean, thousands of murex sea snails were harvested, their glands crushed to release a milky secretion. When exposed to sunlight, this liquid underwent a miraculous transformation, shifting through a spectrum of colors before settling into a deep, rich purple that did not fade. The process was revolting and staggeringly inefficient, requiring perhaps 10,000 snails to produce a single gram of dye. The result was a fabric so costly that in Rome, its use was restricted by sumptuary laws, reserved exclusively for the togas of emperors and the highest magistrates. To wear Tyrian purple was not a fashion choice. It was a visual declaration of divinity and command, a color so intertwined with royalty that the phrase "born to the purple" entered our language. For the profound blues of the world, traders looked to India. There, the indigo plant was cultivated, its leaves fermented in vats to produce a deep, enduring blue dye. Unlike the fugitive blues derived from plants like woad, indigo's color was potent and fast, making it a prized commodity for coloring everything from the robes of Buddhist monks to the elaborate block-printed textiles traded across the Indian Ocean. Reds came from the humble madder root, cultivated from Europe to Central Asia, its alizarin pigment creating a range of warm, brick-red hues. But the most vivid reds came from the earth itself, from the mineral cinnabar. Mined in Spain and China, this toxic mercury sulfide was ground into the pigment vermilion, a brilliant, shocking red used to paint the walls of Pompeian villas and, in China, to ink the seals of emperors on official documents. Its possession was not without danger, as miners and artisans suffered from mercury poisoning, a hidden cost of this imperial color. Yet no blue rivaled the celestial majesty of ultramarine, derived from the same lapis lazuli stone that traveled from the mountains of Afghanistan. The process of creating the pigment was an act of patience and precision. The raw lapis was ground and then mixed into a paste with wax and oils. Skilled artisans would repeatedly knead this paste in a dilute lye solution, each time extracting a finer grade of blue particle. The very finest, purest extract was reserved for the most important commissions, like the cloak of the Virgin Mary in a Renaissance altarpiece. The trade in these colors was a trade in social reality. The ability to wear a specific hue or to commission a painting awash in precious ultramarine was a direct signal of wealth, piety, and status. A European king draped in Tyrian purple, a Mughal emperor on a throne covered in indigo-dyed velvet, and a Chinese scroll brushed with vermilion seals, all were participating in a global system of visual power. The Silk Road did not just carry finished art. It supplied the very palette, granting civilizations the colors with which they painted their gods, crowned their leaders, and declared to the world who they were. But the true wealth of the Silk Road could be measured in health, not just gold. Among the bales of silk and sacks of spice traveled a quieter, more vital cargo, the world's first global pharmacy. Caravans carried small, precious bundles of dried roots, brittle leaves, and delicate crimson threads, each one a concentrated form of healing. From the shaded forests of East Asia came ginseng, a root revered for its revitalizing properties, believed to restore energy and balance. From the mountains of western China came rhubarb, not the stalks for pie, but the dried root prized across Europe and the Middle East as a powerful, reliable purgative to cleanse the body. And from the sun-drenched fields of Persia and Greece came saffron, the fragile stigmas of the crocus flower, painstakingly harvested by hand. A single pound required the labor of tens of thousands of flowers, making it astronomically expensive, used both as a radiant yellow dye and as a medicine to treat melancholy and stomach ailments. These substances were compact, lightweight, and incredibly valuable, the perfect commodities for long-distance trade. Yet the herbs themselves were only half the story. They traveled with something even more potent, the knowledge of how to use them. Physicians, monks, and scholars moved along these same routes, their saddlebags stuffed with scrolls and manuscripts. In the great trading hubs and cosmopolitan cities like Baghdad and Samarkand, these experts would gather. Imagine a scene in a 9th century Baghdad hospital, a crossroads of the world. A Greek physician, steeped in the humoral theory of balancing blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile, might consult with an Ayurvedic practitioner from India about using turmeric for inflammation. They would both examine a Chinese medical text, translated into Arabic, detailing the precise meridians for acupuncture. This was not merely an exchange of ingredients. It was a fusion of entire medical philosophies. The Persian scholar Al-Razi, one of the greatest physicians of the medieval world, synthesized Greek, Persian, and Indian knowledge in his vast encyclopedias. The Chinese herbalist Sun Simiao incorporated treatments from Central Asia into his texts. This cross-pollination saved countless lives, introducing new remedies, improving diagnostic techniques, and creating a truly transnational body of medical science. The next time you sip a soothing ginger tea or take a willow bark derivative for a headache, you are touching the living legacy of those ancient exchanges, where the pursuit of healing built bridges between minds across the deserts and mountains. That living pharmacy depended on something even more fundamental, a technology so simple it became invisible, the very surface on which knowledge was written. While silk carried status and spices carried flavor, paper carried ideas, and it did so with a quiet efficiency that reshaped civilizations. Its story begins in China around the 2nd century before the Common Era, where artisans perfected a method using mulberry bark, old hemp ropes, and rags. They would boil and pound these fibers into a pulp, then skim a thin layer onto a screen to dry, creating a smooth, flexible, and remarkably durable sheet. This was a monumental leap forward. Before paper, writing was a luxury confined to heavy bamboo slips, expensive silk, or brittle strips of wood. Paper democratized the word. Suddenly, records could be kept, poetry could be copied, and ideas could travel without relying on memory alone. For centuries, China guarded this secret closely, but technologies have a way of slipping through borders. The pivotal moment came in the year 751, at the Battle of Talas, a clash between the expanding Abbasid Caliphate and the Tang dynasty's forces in Central Asia. The Abbasids emerged victorious, and among the prisoners taken were Chinese papermakers. These artisans carried the secret in their hands, and their captors, recognizing its immense value, established the first paper mills in the Islamic world, in the cities of Samarkand and Baghdad. The impact was immediate and profound. Paper was cheaper and faster to produce than parchment, which required the skins of countless sheep or calves, and more durable than papyrus, which cracked in dry climates. It fueled an intellectual explosion known as the Islamic Golden Age. Scholars could now afford to build vast personal libraries, copying and commenting on works of Greek philosophy, Indian mathematics, and Persian literature. Bureaucracies ran smoother with reams of administrative documents, and the exchange of scientific and medical knowledge accelerated at an unprecedented pace. This revolution in information technology traveled alongside a parallel trade in the words themselves. Caravans did not carry just blank sheets, they carried finished books, the most precious cargo of all. Buddhist monks journeyed from India to China, their saddlebags heavy with palm leaf manuscripts of sutras, which were then meticulously translated and copied onto this new, durable paper, preserving teachings that might have otherwise been lost. Muslim traders and scholars carried copies of the Quran and scientific treatises from Baghdad to the edges of the known world. Even mundane documents like tax records, merchant contracts, and private letters began to flow along these routes, creating a web of administrative and personal connection that spanned continents. The Silk Road became, in essence, the world's first information superhighway. So when we consider the silk, the spices, and the gems, we might overlook its most transformative export. It was not the content, but the container, the humble sheet of paper that gave ideas wings, allowing knowledge to accumulate, critique itself, and leap from one culture to the next, building the foundation for the modern world upon a surface of pulped mulberry bark. Ideas, however, traveled even lighter than paper. Alongside bolts of silk and sacks of spice, moved an invisible cargo of profound power, entire systems of belief that would reshape continents. The Silk Road was not merely a commercial network, it was a spiritual highway where merchants and monks became missionaries, and caravans carried gods. One of the most transformative journeys was that of Buddhism as it moved out of its birthplace in northern India. This was not a conquest by armies, but a slow, persistent diffusion carried by devout monks who hitched rides with merchant caravans for protection. These monks traveled the treacherous routes through the Hindu Kush Mountains and across the Taklamakan Desert, establishing monastic communities in oasis towns. They brought with them sacred texts, ritual objects, and a new philosophy of compassion and enlightenment that resonated with people from all walks of life. The oasis of Dunhuang, a critical junction on the road, became a monumental testament to this exchange. Here, over centuries, hundreds of cave temples were carved into a cliff face, their walls covered in breathtaking murals depicting Buddhist parables and celestial beings. These caves, known as the Magao Grottos, served as libraries, monasteries, and way stations for travelers, a spiritual recharge station in the middle of nowhere. Perhaps the most famous traveler of all was the Chinese monk Xuanzang. In the 7th century, driven by a desire for purer Buddhist scriptures, he embarked on a 16-year odyssey from China to India and back, braving bandits, deserts, and hostile kingdoms. He returned with hundreds of Sanskrit texts, which he spent the rest of his life translating, fundamentally shaping Chinese Buddhism. His journey, later immortalized in the classic novel Journey to the West, epitomizes how faith could propel individuals across impossible distances, weaving religious threads into the fabric of cultures. Centuries later, a new faith followed the same well-worn paths with astonishing success. Islam spread along the Silk Road not primarily by the sword, but through the marketplace. Muslim merchants, known for their honesty and sophisticated trade networks, established communities in trading hubs from Central Asia to the coasts of China. Their daily prayers, dietary laws, and emphasis on community created visible, attractive models of a disciplined and successful life. As these merchant communities grew, they built mosques and schools. Local rulers, seeing the benefits of connecting with this vast commercial and intellectual network, often converted, bringing their people with them. This is how Islam took root deeply in Central Asia, in the archipelago of Indonesia far to the southeast, and along the trans-Saharan routes into West Africa. In each case, the trader arrived before the teacher, and the mosque rose beside the caravanserai. The routes were also home to other, now vanished faiths that once thrived in the crossroads. Nestorian Christianity, an Eastern sect that emphasized the human nature of Jesus, found a home among Central Asian communities, leaving behind stone monuments with cross and cloud designs in places like Xi'an, China. The dualistic religion of Manichaeism, founded by the prophet Mani in Persia, also spread widely, presenting a cosmic struggle between light and darkness that appealed to many. For a time, these belief systems coexisted and debated in the great cosmopolitan cities of the Silk Road, a marketplace of souls where the most compelling ideas could find followers. This movement of faith was the ultimate intangible trade, one that redefined laws, inspired art, built empires, and gave millions of people a new understanding of their place in the universe, all because a merchant paused to pray beside a campfire in a distant caravanserai. The faith that moved along these roads could inspire empires, but the technologies that traveled with it built and defended them. Among the most consequential exchanges were inventions of war and peace, ideas that transformed battlefields and workshops across continents. One of China's most formidable gifts to the world was not a peaceful one, the sophisticated trigger mechanism of the crossbow. While simple crossbows existed elsewhere, Chinese artisans engineered a precision bronze lock, a complex assembly of levers and sears that allowed a soldier to load a powerful bow, cock it, and hold it ready with minimal strain until the precise moment of release. This mechanism turned the crossbow into the first true point-and-click weapon, enabling a relatively untrained conscript to launch a bolt with enough force to pierce armor at a distance. It was a democratizing and terrifying piece of military hardware. The knowledge of this technology drifted west slowly, likely through sketches, descriptions, or captured weapons, eventually influencing siege engine design in the Middle East and Europe, where the crossbow would later become a dominant force in medieval warfare. Moving in the opposite direction was an innovation that redefined mounted combat, the stirrup. Its origins lie in the nomadic cultures of Central Asia, where riders needed stability on horseback for archery and herding. The simple loop of leather or metal was a revelation. It provided a solid platform, allowing a rider to stand and leverage the full force of their body, not just their arm, when wielding a weapon. Most importantly, it gave the rider a fundamental connection to the horse, transforming them from a passenger perched on top into a unified fighting platform. This technology was adopted by the Chinese and later by cultures across Eurasia, culminating in the era of the heavily armored knight in Europe. The stirrup did not just change how battles were fought, it altered the very structure of society, creating a military elite whose power was rooted in expensive war horses and equipment, giving rise to feudalism. Beyond the battlefield, the flow of knowledge was constant and transformative. From the Islamic world came the astrolabe, an intricate handheld computer of brass and wood. This device, which combined detailed star charts with movable components, allowed astronomers, navigators, and timekeepers to solve complex problems, determining the time from the sun's height, calculating latitudes, or aligning a mosque toward Mecca. It was a masterpiece of applied mathematics and craftsmanship that spread from Spain to India, embodying the Silk Road's role as a conduit for scientific instruments. Water management techniques also traveled. The Kanat system, an underground channel for tapping mountain aquifers and delivering water without evaporation across arid landscapes, originated in ancient Persia. This technology spread east to Central Asia and westward across North Africa, enabling settlements and agriculture in some of the world's driest regions. Even architectural ideas moved, like the pointed arch from Sasanian Persia, which would later find spectacular expression in the soaring vaults of Gothic cathedrals in Europe. What is crucial to understand is that this transfer was almost never a simple handoff. It was an indirect, often agonizingly slow process of observation, adaptation, and local genius. A technology like advanced steelmaking, where Chinese methods for creating high-carbon steel through repeated forging and folding produced legendary blades, might be seen by a traveler, described in a merchant's tale, or observed in a captured sword. The core idea would then be grafted onto local traditions, materials, and needs, sometimes centuries later, resulting in something new. The Damascus steel of the Middle East or the famed Toledo steel of Spain are not Chinese products, but they are descendants of a global conversation in metallurgy that the Silk Road made possible. These routes did not just carry finished goods, they carried the blueprints for the future, scattered like seeds that would take root and blossom in different soils, creating a world whose foundations were quietly, irrevocably linked. The blueprints for the future were not only forged in bronze and steel, but also grew silently from the earth. While technologies and faiths traveled in the minds of men, another, more fundamental revolution was taking root, one that would literally reshape the land and fill the bellies of millions. The Silk Road functioned as history's greatest and slowest grocery store, a vast network for exchanging the very building blocks of life itself. This was the agricultural exchange, a biological transfer that permanently rewrote the menus of entire civilizations. For every merchant carrying silk, there was another with a small, precious pouch of seeds or a bundle of carefully wrapped saplings bouncing in a saddlebag. From the orchards of China came peaches and apricots, succulent stone fruits that had never been tasted in the gardens of Persia or Rome. Traveling eastward from the fertile valleys of Central Asia and the Middle East came grapes for wine, tart pomegranates, and perhaps most importantly, alfalfa. This hardy, nitrogen-fixing legume was a wonder crop for fodder, dramatically improving the diet of horses and livestock, which in turn increased the power of cavalry and the reliability of transport. From the gardens of India and Persia came citrus fruits like lemons and oranges, the leafy green spinach, and the versatile eggplant, each one a new flavor, a new color, a new possibility on the plate. These transfers happened not through grand imperial decrees, but through countless small, personal acts of curiosity and commerce. A trader, having tasted a magnificent peach at a caravanserai in Samarkand, might save a few of its pits, wrapped in cloth, to plant in his own homeland. A Buddhist monk traveling from India might carry a cutting of a sugar cane stalk, knowing its sweet juice could be a valuable offering or medicine. The impact of this quiet traffic was nothing short of monumental. Consider the introduction of rice from East Asia into the Middle East. This high-yield grain, which thrived in wet paddies, offered a new staple that could support larger, denser populations in regions with adequate water, altering settlement patterns and diets forever. In the opposite direction, cotton traveled from India to China. The Chinese, masters of silk and hemp, now had access to a new, durable fiber that was easier to produce than silk and more comfortable than coarse hemp, revolutionizing everyday clothing and textiles. But the sweetest revolution of all was sugar. The knowledge of sugar cane cultivation and processing techniques migrated from India through Persia and into the Islamic world, where it was refined. For centuries, honey was the primary sweetener in Europe, a rare and expensive luxury. The arrival of sugar, first as a costly spice and medicine, then as a plantation crop, would eventually create an insatiable demand that reshaped global economies and, tragically, the map of human bondage. This biological exchange was the deepest layer of Silk Road commerce. It changed what people could grow, what they could eat, and how many of them could survive in a given place. The peach in your pie, the spinach in your salad, and the cotton in your shirt are all living relics of those ancient journeys, a testament to a time when the most valuable cargo in the world could be held in the palm of your hand, waiting to be planted. Yet the most devastating cargo on those ancient roads was not carried in chests or sacks, but in chains. For all its exchange of culture and ideas, the Silk Road also supported a brutal and expansive trade in human beings, a dark undercurrent that flowed as steadily as any river of silk. People themselves became a commodity, captured, transported, and sold across continents. Slaves were taken from the vast Eurasian steppes, from the Caucasus Mountains, from the Slavic regions of Eastern Europe, and from the coasts of Africa. They were marched in coffles, their necks bound by ropes or wooden yokes, to the great slave markets of the world. In the bustling crossroads of Samarkand, traders would examine the strength of a young man from the north, assessing his potential as a laborer or soldier. In the mighty capital of Constantinople, the sheer variety of enslaved people on offer was a testament to the reach of these networks, from Circassian women sought as domestic servants to African men prized for their physical endurance. Their fates were as varied as their origins, and often tragically paradoxical. Some of the most powerful military elites in history began their lives as property. The Mamluks of Egypt, for instance, were slave soldiers, often taken as boys from the Turkic tribes of Central Asia. They were converted to Islam, trained rigorously in warfare, and formed into a formidable military caste that eventually seized power and ruled Egypt and Syria for centuries. Similarly, the Ottoman Empire's Janissaries were Christian boys from the Balkans, taken through a system called the Devshirme, converted, and molded into the empire's most loyal and fearsome infantry. In these cases, slavery was a brutal pathway to immense, though always precarious, power. For countless others, there was no such ascent. They spent their lives as domestic servants in wealthy households, as concubines in imperial harems, as laborers in mines or on large agricultural estates, or as rowers on galley ships. Their lives were defined by toil and a profound lack of freedom. This system was a complex, multi-ethnic machine. It was not a simple matter of one civilization enslaving another, but a tangled web where everyone could be both trader and commodity. A Mongol Khan might sell Slavic captives to a Persian merchant, who would then sell them to an Arab buyer. A Venetian trader might purchase a Circassian slave in the Black Sea port of Kaffa and transport her to Cairo. This constant movement did more than transfer labor. It transferred people, and with them their skills, their languages, their beliefs, and their very DNA. A skilled Armenian metalsmith sold into servitude in Damascus might pass his craft to local apprentices. A Nubian cook from Sudan could introduce new spices and recipes to a Persian kitchen. The genetic legacy of this vast, forced migration is still written in populations from the Mediterranean to the Indian Ocean, a silent and somber reminder of its scale. To ignore this chapter is to see only the glittering surface of the Silk Road. The same caravans that carried the light of learning and the beauty of art also carried the profound weight of human suffering. The networks that spread paper and peaches were built in part by enslaved hands. This uncomfortable truth is essential for a complete picture, revealing that the flow of goods across continents was never purely noble. It was a human system, with all the brilliance and barbarity that implies, where the most valuable and tragic cargo of all was a person. The same networks that traded in human lives also carried the refined essence of the forest, a luxury crafted from nature's own defense. Chinese lacquerware was a marvel of organic chemistry, born from the toxic sap of the lacquer tree. Harvesting this sap was dangerous work, as it could cause severe skin rashes, but the result was worth the risk. Artisans would apply dozens, sometimes hundreds, of thin coats of this sap to a wooden or fabric base, allowing each layer to dry and harden in a humid chamber. The final product was a surface of supernatural durability, resistant to water, heat, and acids, yet incredibly lightweight. It was then transformed into art. Master craftsmen inlaid it with mother of pearl, painted it with intricate scenes of courtly life, or carved through layers of different colored lacquers to reveal dazzling geometric patterns. A lacquer box for storing tea, a delicate tray for serving sweets, or a folding screen for a wealthy household was not just furniture. It was a portable piece of captured light and resilience, a testament to a patience and skill that fascinated elites from Persia to Europe. While lacquerware represented the height of cultivated forest craft, another luxury came from the wild, frozen north. From the vast, silent expanse of the Siberian taiga flowed a river of furs, the ultimate symbol of warmth and status. Trappers braved brutal winters to secure the pelts of sable, with its incredibly dense, silky dark fur, the pure white winter coat of the ermine, and the rich red of the Arctic fox. These furs did not travel directly from trapper to emperor. They moved along a long, complex chain of middlemen. A hunter might trade a bundle of sable pelts to a local chieftain for tools and grain. That chieftain would then trade them to a traveling merchant at a seasonal fair. That merchant would transport them south to a major oasis city like Kashgar or Samarkand, where they would be graded, bundled, and sold onward to another trader heading for a grand capital. By the time a single sable pelt lined the collar of a Chinese imperial robe, or trimmed the cloak of a European king, its price had multiplied 100-fold. In the courts of Ming China, ermine was reserved for the emperor's own garments. In medieval Europe, the white fur of the ermine, with its distinctive black tail tips, became the traditional lining for royal coronation cloaks, symbolizing purity and majesty. This demand created an economic engine that reached into the most remote wilderness, pulling its resources into a global market. The lacquered box and the sable-trimmed hat, one from a managed tree and the other from a wild animal, reveal the Silk Road's true nature. It was not a single road, but a capillary system that drew value from every possible ecosystem, from tropical spice islands to frozen boreal forests, funneling the concentrated luxury of entire biomass into the hands of the world's most powerful people. The luxurious pelts and lacquered boxes were accompanied by a more ephemeral treasure, the sound of distant lands. Alongside the caravans moved a symphony of cultural exchange, carried in the shape of musical instruments and the melodies they produced. The most famous traveler was the lute, an instrument whose journey perfectly maps the routes of connection. It began in ancient Persia as the barbat, a pear-shaped instrument with a deep, resonant body. As it moved eastward along the Silk Road, it was adopted and adapted by Central Asian cultures, eventually reaching China by at least the 4th century. There, Chinese artisans refined it, creating the pipa, an instrument with a straighter neck, a shallower wooden body, and often 4 or 5 strings. The pipa became a centerpiece of Tang Dynasty court music, its bright, percussive plucking capable of evoking everything from gentle rainfall to the chaos of a battlefield. But the lute's story did not end there. It continued westward as well, entering the Byzantine Empire and later medieval Europe, where its descendants would evolve into the oud and the lute, instruments that defined the musical soundscapes of the Islamic world and the European Renaissance. This was not a simple case of copying. It was a process of creative reinvention, where each culture heard the instrument's potential and reshaped it to fit their own aesthetic and musical needs. The exchange went far beyond lutes. Zithers, like the Chinese kin, a 7-string instrument revered for its philosophical and meditative qualities, influenced similar instruments in Korea and Japan. Harps from Mesopotamia traveled east, while Central Asian fiddles with horsehair bows moved in all directions, ancestors of instruments like the Persian kamancheh and the Chinese erhu. Drums of every size and shape, from small handheld frame drums to large ceremonial kettle drums, provided the universal heartbeat for rituals, festivals, and military marches across continents. More than the instruments themselves, the ideas of how to organize sound began to blend. In cosmopolitan hubs like Chang'an, the Tang capital, or Samarkand, musicians from across Asia gathered. A court orchestra in Chang'an might include performers playing Persian flutes, Indian double-rate instruments, Central Asian lutes, and traditional Chinese bells and stone chimes. The musical scales, or modes, they used began to interweave. The complex rhythmic cycles of Indian music might influence a Central Asian drumming pattern. The subtle, microtonal nuances of Persian melodies could find their way into a new composition for the pipa. A single piece performed in a Chang'an tea house could be a living tapestry of sonic influences, its melody hinting at a caravan's song from the Taklamakan Desert, its rhythm echoing a Hindu devotional chant, and its ornamentation borrowed from a Persian love ballad. This auditory exchange was the most intimate form of cultural sharing. You cannot hold a melody in your hand, you cannot weigh it or trade it for spice. Yet it traveled effortlessly, leaping from ear to ear, from generation to generation, carried by the musicians who were themselves vital commodities of the Silk Road. To hear that lost soundtrack is to understand that the connections forged by trade were not merely economic or political. They were deeply, vibrantly human, resonating in the very air that people breathed. But the most devastating cargo on those ancient roads was utterly invisible, a silent traveler that moved in the breath of merchants and the fur of stowaway rats. The same connectivity that spread silks and scriptures also created the world's first superhighway for pandemics, proving that the greatest threat could be microscopic. For all its benefits, the Silk Road had a lethal double edge, and history's deadliest proof arrived in the 6th century. It began with a fever, then painful swellings in the groin and armpits, the telltale buboes that gave the bubonic plague its name. This was the plague of Justinian, named for the Byzantine emperor who ruled in Constantinople when it struck. The pathogen Yersinia pestis is believed to have originated in rodent populations somewhere in Central Asia. From there, it hitched a ride. Infected fleas, living on black rats that nested in the grain sacks and cloth bales of merchant ships and caravans, traveled the entire length of the trade network. They reached the bustling ports of the Mediterranean, and from there, the plague exploded. At its height, it was killing an estimated 5,000 people a day in Constantinople alone. Bodies piled up in the streets faster than they could be buried. The pandemic raged for 2 centuries in waves, ultimately killing perhaps a quarter of the population of the eastern Mediterranean. It crippled the Byzantine Empire's economy and military, altering the course of history in Europe and the Middle East. Yet this was only a grim rehearsal. The same bacterial enemy returned with even greater fury 8 centuries later, in the form of the Black Death. By the 1300s, the Mongol Empire had unified much of the Silk Road under what historians call the Pax Mongolica, a period of relative stability and safety that actually accelerated trade and travel. This peace was the pathogen's perfect opportunity. Again, the plague erupted from Central Asian reservoirs, but this time it raced along the reinvigorated trade routes with terrifying speed. From the Caspian Sea to the Crimea, and then onto Geno's merchant ships fleeing a besieged port, it reached Sicily in 1347. Within just 5 years, it had swept across all of Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa. The mortality was apocalyptic. Europe lost between 30 and 50% of its entire population. Whole villages were wiped out, left as ghost towns. The social and economic consequences were earth-shattering. With so many dead, a severe labor shortage followed. Surviving peasants and workers, now in high demand, could suddenly demand better wages and conditions, beginning to dismantle the rigid structures of feudalism. Faith in religious and political authorities crumbled as prayers and processions failed to stop the dying. The vast Mongol Empire itself, whose peace had enabled the plague's spread, fractured under the strain of the demographic collapse, ending the Pax Mongolica. The Silk Road, that magnificent web of connection, had demonstrated a brutal universal law. It was utterly neutral. It would carry a Buddhist sutra as readily as a deadly bacterium, a bolt of silk as easily as an infected flea. The networks that built the modern world by exchanging goods and ideas were also the very vectors that nearly destroyed it, a sobering reminder that every connection carries a potential cost, and that progress and peril have always traveled the same road. A plague could rewrite societies, but it could not stop the daily need for a sharp blade or a warm cloak. For every chest of pearls bound for a palace, there were 100 carts loaded with the humble, essential goods that kept civilizations running. The real economic engine of the Silk Road was not the spice merchant or the gem trader, but the peddler selling iron tools and the weaver bartering rolls of sturdy felt. Think of a farmer in a Persian village. His plowshare, the metal tip that cuts the earth, might be forged from high-quality steel that traveled thousands of miles from a workshop in India or Sri Lanka, where smiths had mastered the art of creating crucible steel, a material famous for its strength and flexibility. This was not a ceremonial sword. It was a practical investment that meant more food could be grown, more families fed. That same superior steel, traded in ingots or as finished blades, was what a blacksmith in Central Asia would use to craft a durable axe for a carpenter or a reliable knife for a cook. The flow went both ways. From the nomadic steppes came a different kind of essential, textiles woven from wool and compressed into thick, durable felt. For the settled peoples of China and Persia, living in stone houses, felt was a curious material, but for the nomads who produced it, it was the fabric of survival. They used it to cover their portable yurts, creating homes that were warm in winter and cool in summer. They made boots, hats, and heavy cloaks from it, all perfectly suited to the harsh winds of the open plains. Traders carried these rolls of felt south and east, where they were valued for their practicality, used as saddle blankets, floor coverings, or insulation in the homes of those who admired the nomads' rugged ingenuity. Then there were the small, personal items that filled a merchant's pack. Everyday pottery, not the fine porcelain for display, but simple, glazed bowls and jugs for cooking and storage, produced in regional kilns and traded a few hundred miles to the next town. Leather goods, from durable saddles and harnesses for the all-important transport animals to water skins and protective cases for tools. A bronze mirror, polished to a high shine, was a prized possession for anyone, a piece of portable vanity and a glimpse of one's own face in a world without glass. And perhaps most symbolic of all, the humble sewing needle. Made of bronze or iron, a packet of needles was lightweight, cheap to produce, and universally needed. A merchant could trade a few needles for a meal or bundle them with other goods, knowing that in every village, in every tent, someone would need to mend a torn shirt or stitch a new sole on a worn shoe. These were the unsung heroes of transcontinental commerce. They generated smaller profits per item, but they were traded in vast quantities, forming the reliable, steady business that employed countless ordinary merchants, camel drivers, and market stallholders. This traffic in commonplace things proves the Silk Road was not just a fantasy lane for the ultra-rich. It was a working supply chain for the ancient world, stitching together the fabric of daily life from the Mediterranean to the Pacific, one wool blanket and one iron plowshare at a time. Behind every bale of silk and every sack of pepper stood a network of people, and no group mastered the art of the deal like the Sogdians. Hailing from the fertile valleys between the Amu Darya and Sirdarya rivers, with their glittering capital cities of Samarkand and Bukhara, these Central Asian traders became the indispensable middlemen of the ancient world. They did not merely travel the Silk Road, they built its very operating system. From their heartland in modern-day Uzbekistan, Sogdian merchant families established a string of permanent trading colonies, small pieces of homes scattered like stepping stones across the continent. You could find a Sogdian community in every major hub, from the bustling markets of Chang'an in China to the distant frontier outposts of the Byzantine Empire. These were not just guest houses. They were full-fledged commercial districts with warehouses, temples, and homes, creating a reliable, familiar network for any Sogdian trader arriving in a foreign land. This gave them an incredible advantage, a trusted web of contacts, credit, and information that spanned 6-7 miles. Their success was built on a specific set of skills. Sogdian merchants were famously multilingual, often fluent in Sogdian, Persian, Chinese, and various Turkic dialects. This allowed them to negotiate directly with producers in one region and elite buyers in another, cutting out layers of intermediaries and maximizing profit. But they were far more than simple peddlers. They acted as financiers, lending money and arranging complex letters of credit so that valuable metals did not have to be physically carried on every journey. They organized entire caravans, securing camels, hiring guards, and plotting routes based on the latest intelligence about bandit activity or political unrest. In many ways, they served as informal diplomats, their deep cultural knowledge making them trusted advisors to kings and khans, who relied on them for news from distant empires. Historical records bring a few of these figures to life. Chinese chronicles mention a Sogdian merchant named Kang Tai, who traveled to the court of a Southeast Asian kingdom in the 3rd century and wrote a detailed report on the region's customs and products, a vital piece of market research for future trade. Another, named Angia, served as a translator and commercial agent for a powerful Turkic chieftain in northern China, his tomb murals showing him greeting visitors from Persia and the Byzantine world, a testament to his cosmopolitan life. The Sogdians were the ultimate connectors. They understood that moving goods was not just about geography, it was about relationships, trust, and the seamless flow of information. When a Chinese court wanted a specific type of Central Asian horse, they turned to a Sogdian broker. When a Persian noble sought the latest in Chinese silks, a Sogdian merchant in Samarkand could arrange it. They were the human glue that held the sprawling, fragile system together, proving that the most vital infrastructure on the Silk Road was not made of stone or sand, but of human connection and relentless entrepreneurial spirit. The Sogdian merchant's genius meant nothing without a beast that could translate his ledgers into miles. The true engine of the Silk Road was not a machine, but a living creature, the two-humped Bactrian camel. This animal was a biological marvel, perfectly engineered for the task. Its broad, padded feet spread out to prevent sinking in the soft desert sands, while its thick eyelashes and sealable nostrils protected it from the endless, stinging grit of sandstorms. Most importantly, those iconic humps were not water reservoirs, but fat stores, allowing the camel to travel for days, even weeks, without food or water in the harshest stretches of the Taklamakan Desert. A single, strong Bactrian could carry a load of 200 to 300 kilograms, the weight of several full-grown men, plodding steadily for 25 miles a day. Caravans were not casual processions. They were meticulously organized supply chains on the hoof. Dozens, sometimes hundreds of these camels would be linked nose to tail by ropes, forming a living train that snaked across the landscape. Each animal's load was carefully balanced, and a team of experienced camel drivers, often from nomadic tribes who knew the land intimately, guided them, their lives dependent on reading the subtle signs of the desert for the next hidden water source. But even the hardiest camel and driver needed to rest. This need gave rise to one of the Silk Road's most vital institutions, the caravanserai. These were not simple inns, they were fortified way stations, often built a single day's journey apart, about 20 to 30 miles. Picture a massive, square fortress rising from the empty plains, its high, windowless walls offering protection from bandits and the elements. A single, heavy gate would swing open at dawn and dusk. Inside, a central courtyard would become a chaotic, multilingual tableau of life. Merchants from Rome, Persia, India, and China would mingle, their camels and horses stabled in arched recesses that lined the walls. Upstairs, in sparse but secure rooms, the traders could sleep, negotiate deals, and share vital intelligence about the road ahead. The caravanserai was a hub of commerce, a cultural melting pot, and a sanctuary in the wilderness, its rhythm of opening and closing gates dictating the daily pulse of transcontinental trade. The security of the caravanserai allowed for the careful handling of the goods themselves. Packaging was a science of survival. Silks, relatively lightweight but precious, were compressed into tight, manageable bales and wrapped in coarse cloth or leather. Spices, the compact treasure, were sealed in double-layered sacks of hemp or leather to contain their potent aromas and prevent contamination. The most nerve-wracking task was packing porcelain and glass. Each piece would be individually wrapped in straw or soft paper, then nestled into wooden crates whose every inch of free space was stuffed with bulk commodities like tea leaves, beans, or grain. This ingenious method meant that even if the crate was jostled, the fragile items were held fast in a cushioning embrace. And if the worst happened and they shattered, the merchant still arrived with a crate full of sellable foodstuffs. For liquids like wine, olive oil, or rare perfumes, the containers were as important as the contents. They traveled in amphorae, those distinctive clay jars with two handles and a pointed base, or in treated animal skins, typically goat skins, which were lighter and less prone to shattering than clay. The journey between caravanserais was where the real danger lived. Bandits, knowing the routes and the schedules, lay in wait in narrow mountain passes or behind desert dunes. Caravans hired armed guards, but a well-planned ambush could still spell disaster, wiping out a merchant's life savings in a violent hour. The environment itself was a relentless adversary. In the desert, temperatures could swing from scorching, flesh-baking heat during the day to bone-chilling cold at night. Sandstorms could rise without warning, blinding travelers and burying trails. In the mountains, like the forbidding Pamirs or the Tian Shan, the passes were narrow, icy, and prone to avalanches or rockfalls. A misstep on a narrow ledge could send a camel and its priceless load tumbling into a deep ravine, lost forever. Every successful journey was a triumph of logistics, endurance, and sheer luck over a gauntlet of natural and human threats. It forces us to ask, with such immense difficulty and risk, what could possibly compel people to keep sending these caravans out, year after year, century after century? The caravans eventually fell silent, but the world they created never faded away. The direct overland routes that had pulsed with life for over a millennium began their slow decline in the 15th century, not from a lack of desire, but from a fundamental shift in how the world moved. The age of discovery, sparked by that ancient hunger for spices, offered a new answer: the sea. Portuguese, Spanish, Dutch, and later English ships began sailing around the Cape of Good Hope, reaching the sources of pepper, cloves, and silk directly. A single massive cargo ship could carry the equivalent of an entire caravan of 100 camels, and it could do so faster, cheaper, and without paying the countless tolls to land-based empires and bandits along the way. The economics were undeniable. Why brave the Taklamakan desert when you could ride the monsoon winds? The great inland crossroads cities like Samarkand and Kashgar saw their importance wane as power and wealth flowed to coastal ports like Lisbon, Amsterdam, and later London. The Silk Road, as a dominant artery of global commerce, receded into history and legend. Yet to say it disappeared is a profound misunderstanding. Its true legacy was never the dirt tracks themselves, but the irreversible changes they wrought upon the world. The most visible legacy is written on the faces and in the cultures of Central Asia. In the bazaars of Uzbekistan or Kazakhstan, you see a breathtaking blend of features, a living mosaic of the countless peoples who passed through, settled, and intermarried. The Uyghurs of Western China carry a genetic and cultural heritage that mixes East Asian, Persian, and Turkic influences. The languages spoken across the region are layered with loanwords, where a Persian term for a market might sit beside a Chinese word for tea or a Turkic word for horse. This is the human legacy of the Silk Road, a region that is not a border between civilizations, but a vibrant, blended civilization in its own right, forged in the caravanserais. Art tells the same story of fusion. Look at a Buddhist mural from the Magao caves at Dunhuang. The enlightened Buddha might be depicted with flowing, classical drapery borrowed from Greek art, a style that traveled east with Alexander the Great's legacy. A Chinese porcelain vase from the Ming Dynasty might be painted with cobalt blue from Persia, depicting floral patterns that originated in the Islamic world. The architectural domes of Islamic Central Asia share a lineage with Roman and Byzantine engineering, ideas that drifted along these same routes. These are not coincidences, they are the fingerprints of a thousand-year conversation. More fundamentally, the Silk Road laid the psychological and logistical groundwork for globalization. It proved, for the first time on such a scale, that the world was connectable. It established the patterns of long-distance trade, credit, and diplomacy. It created the first truly global brands, where Chinese silk, Indian pepper, and Roman glass were recognized and desired from one end of Eurasia to the other. It demonstrated that ideas, religions, and technologies could leap across cultural boundaries, transforming societies in their wake. This ancient network made the world smaller long before the internet. It is this powerful legacy that makes the Silk Road not a relic, but a direct blueprint for the 21st century. Look at China's Monumental Belt and Road Initiative, one of the largest infrastructure and investment projects in human history. It is explicitly framed as a revival, a new Silk Road for a new age. While vastly more complex, involving high-speed rail, deep water ports, and fiber optic cables alongside roads, the core ambition is strikingly familiar: to create a web of connectivity across Eurasia and beyond, facilitating the flow of goods, capital, and influence. It is a modern empire building not with armies, but with contracts, loans, and concrete, seeking to write the economic rules for a connected continent. The ancient and the modern initiatives share the same foundational belief that controlling the pathways of exchange is the ultimate source of power and prosperity. The spirit of the Silk Road, its relentless drive for connection, its blending of cultures, and its transformation of landscapes through sheer human ambition, did not vanish with the last camel caravan. It simply evolved. It lives on in our globalized economy, in our intertwined cultures, and in the grand geopolitical strategies of today. The roads may now be paved with asphalt and lit by satellites, but the journey they enable, the exchange they force, and the world they shape are part of a story that began 2,000 years ago with a single step into a desert, and a dream of what lay on the other side. That single step into the desert carried the weight of the world in its saddlebags. We have traveled with caravans laden not just with silk and spice, but with the very ingredients of history itself, from the heavenly horses that built empires to the humble paper that preserved their thoughts. We have traced the scent of sanctity in frankincense and the color of power in Tyrian purple. We have witnessed the silent, devastating travel of plagues and the vibrant, enduring journey of faiths. This incredible diversity reveals the core truth. The Silk Road was never a single road for silks, nor was it merely a route for goods. It was a living, breathing web of human connection, a dynamic system of exchange that moved civilizations toward one another. Its legacy is the world we live in today, a world of blended cultures, shared technologies, and intertwined destinies. It gave us a connected planet, with all the brilliance of shared knowledge and all the peril of shared vulnerability. So we leave you with one final question from this journey through time. Of all the astonishing items that traveled those ancient paths, from porcelain and pepper to musical modes and medical texts, which one surprises you the most? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this journey into the mysteries of history, please give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you do not miss our next adventure. Thank you for traveling with us.